And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother to the temple, creator of the many, many games in the Fragged universe. About a third of them we've covered here on this channel in previous interviews. And now back with the second edition of Fragged Aeternum. The more Bloodborne and Gothic horror inspired affair. The one and only Wade Dyer. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, good, Mildred. It's nice to be back chatting with you again.
Nice to have you back. As my chiropractor often says, glad to see you're back. So, this will be an interesting thing, because while we have talked about Fragged Aeternum before, the time that we did was when I was first interviewing you, and it was that grab bag of different Fragged products at the time.
Oh yeah, a bunch of my first edition sort of alternate settings.
And because of that, it had to it had well, we did cover it a fair amount. It had to share space with a bunch of other things. So
Hmm.
this will be an interesting beast. But from what I recall, Fragged Aeternum was born out of you not being able to play Bloodborne because you didn't have a PS4 at the time, so you ended up making Fragged Aeternum. In
Not quite that, but I think that's a little bit of it.
Mhm.
Um, so I created Aeternum first back, as I said before, when I was doing my first edition books.
Mhm.
It was an back then. I would say my products were intensely indie, in that the rules were spread across 3 different books. So if you actually wanted to play first edition properly, you needed the Fragged Empire core rulebook, then you needed the Fragged Aeternum sort of book supplement to go with that. And then afterwards, a year and a half ago, I did another expansion which rounded out the rules. So that was the Greyberg Market. And so now I'm doing, everything's in one book. The rules, the law, whole lot, giving it the sexy second edition treatment with the fancy art and all that sort of stuff. But my motivation for doing this was, firstly, I wanted to create something that was just intensely different to the other titles that I had. Um, my other titles, Empire, Seas, Kingdom, were very much that sort of classic ragtag band of people going around, found family, doing odd jobs, missions.
Mhm.
And you could kind of do very broad types of campaigns. You could be almost any sort of character. Whereas Fragged Aeternum, you are part of a very specific faction. Everybody's a tethered. They're part of a specific order that hunts giant fiends to protect human souls. So you've
Mhm.
got a particular objective there. It's much more clear. Um, those other settings were also kind of logic first, I would say, in terms of their world building.
Mhm.
Um, whereas this one, I would say, is much more, let's just say, sort of heart first, we might say, or sort of aesthetic first, um, in that it's dealing with a lot of spiritual stuff and obviously being horror, but not
Mhm.
that kind of gory, shock you type of horror, but more of a kind of lots of gothic architecture, giant fiends and
Yeah,
skulls and giant weapons and that sort of stuff.
Gothic horror and the
Um,
things that go bump in the night.
yeah, and you stab it.
Mhm.
I
And
might even describe Aeternum as almost like gothic superheroes, like the characters, and being these immortal, superpowered people that fight giant things that are even more powerful than them, sort of tone. But
mhm.
yeah, so I was just want to do something really different, and I found Bloodborne was particularly inspirational. I particularly liked the world building, the music. I loved the music of Bloodborne. I often listen to the OST of that, and I use that as a bit of an anchor point to sort of help teach people what I'm aiming for. Because if you do something that's so weird and so different on an original IP, sometimes people struggle to get a bit of a grasp on what's going on. Um, whereas I use Blood Bowls like, hey, if you get that, you're going to get this, even though I'm not trying to replicate it exactly. It's a good sort of stepping stone into showing you what I'm aiming for.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But and it's for that reason that things like a Appendix N is something I often ask people. Uh, not that every book needs that, but sometimes it's called touchstones, sometimes it's called a influence map or whatnot.
Hmm.
But just something to draw those parallels. Uh, and
Yeah. I often use like that in my marketing. I might do a touchstone, especially if something I'm trying to reach out to a new audience. But I'm having my art carries a lot in sort of showing people what I'm aiming for.
yeah. Now, with the past second editions that I've interviewed you on, whether both both Kingdom and Empire, in both of those, you had a significant either timeline or tonal shift between editions, and I'm curious if that's something that happens here, where there's some sort of shift that emphasizes other things compared to the first one.
I think that was particularly prominent in Kingdom.
Yes.
Frag Kingdom 2 was significantly different to Frag Kingdom 1, because I shoved the timeline forward 200 years and I changed a lot in that. I went from like no established nations to a handful of established nations. Fragged Aeternum, this is a little bit. It's a little bit like Fragged Empire. I don't believe I sort of fleshed out the setting a lot more in second edition than first edition.
Yeah,
I think
I
pretty.
I brought that up when we talked about Empire. That it's more of a reasserting of the tone.
Yeah. I felt I had a better grasp of what made it special, and I could do a second edition that sort of doubled down on that. Fragged Aeternum, I think the setting, in terms of its core essence and what I was aiming for, I think was pretty much perfect with my first edition. Endless city, immortal players, PCs fighting giant fiends, and GM is told not to hold back and try to kill the PCs. And it just, everything just worked the way I wanted it. Second edition is largely a refining of that lore, sort of grabbing all my various books, putting it together, fleshing out some more stuff. But also, I kind of wanted to explore a few extra areas in second edition. So, an example of this probably would be in Fiends have always been the main opponent that you fight. Basically, they're like demons, okay? And big bestial things, you know. But adding two more major opponents in second edition. So one of them is the otherworldly invaders. And so that covers your eldritch type creatures, but also your fae and stuff like that. And the idea is that these are creatures that have come from other dimensions and that are either here to be parasites or to feed on people, or maybe their dimension got destroyed and they're sort of refugees sort of fleeing into Aeternum, into this reality. And so you get a lot of strangeness with that. So that's much more, whereas Fiends are much more your exploration of good and evil, you know, holy, unholy, that type of stuff. Whereas Eldritch stuff gives much more exploration of the kind of the unknown in terms of like what's possible, what's out there, alternate twisting of reality, maybe a bit more of, if you want a bit more of a logic or science bent, you know, that'd be a great one. And a little bit maybe less of a morality sort of focus. The other type of opponent that I've added in, because this game's really, your campaigns are going to be defined by what you fight, okay? The other one is they're called the Underdead, which is effectively my undead. And so that's fleshing out your zombies and your ghosts and your skeletons and your necromancers, and adding my own particular twist on them. And that's, you know, that's more like that's a pretty simplistic foe, where they're kind of death things and they fight you, and so if you want something that's a little less heady, I think a sort of the Underdead could create a good foe, for a bit more of a simpler campaign. Yeah, and so that was a big thing that I've added in second edition. I've also added some new archetypes for player characters, but yeah.
And it's interesting to do that, since while fiends are always going to be the focus in some form, it's always good to have other options so you don't fall into what I've called the Moriarty effect. You know, that I know it's probably been a while since you read Sherlock Holmes, but that whole thing with Moriarty somehow being directly or indirectly involved with all of Holmes's cases up to that point.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, he was the only one that could actually challenge the protagonist, and so
yeah,
he keeps being sucked back in.
it's
Yeah.
it has the unintended consequence of bottlenecking the world. If I were to use a tabletop example, uh, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and specifically how almost everything that's going on in that world is tied in some form to the worm. Like, the intent is to make the worm like this all-encompassing evil, but you end up bottlenecking. And
well, it's one of my. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The final example I'll bring up. You've probably seen the Burton Batman in '89. The thing that a lot of people consistently criticize is having the Joker be the man who killed Bruce Wayne's parents.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of that. It just makes it less interesting. I think your examples are pretty much spot on. A bit of a catch, sort of a saying that I like to say a lot is my job as an RPG creator primarily is to provide creative logs for other people's fire. It's there just to create fuel and ideas and possibilities for other people to run games. And I think that's something that I felt like Aeternum. Okay, I really like the core setting, but I want to add in some more stuff that players can fight, more things. So it's not always the fiends, as you say. Like maybe it's some eldritch horror that's come from another dimension is doing stuff, or maybe some undead vampire has sort of risen, and yep.
And so, based on what you're telling me, it sounds like with Aeternum, it's more of a reassertion of the world that is taking place, of a reassertion of things like the Infinite City and its many districts and factions and whatnot.
Yeah. Like for example, I'm providing some more maps in my books, just sort of showing a little bit more of the Infinite City, and I did that because I want to emphasize its size a little bit more, and to empower players, GMs, to like maybe you want to run campaigns that are set in not the default district of Strigham. Maybe you want to go somewhere else. Yeah. Yep.
And with that kind of thing in mind, obviously, when because of the fact that Bloodborne is the main thing that's cited, as far as that influence map I mentioned, I think inevitably people are going to bring up the concept of trick weapons and the like. And for people who are just tuning into Fragged Aeternum for this one, is the idea of trick weapons something that has the potential to be present?
Yeah, actually, so a little while ago, I actually posted up on the RPG design subreddit, and I was just expressing my thoughts. And one things I did was sort of my take on my game and talking about what I'm going to do differently and what I'm going to do the same as Bloodborne. And so there's a third category, which is sort of like the things that you can do in my game that aren't necessarily the default option, like they are the default option. So there is trick weapons in terms of that dual weapon thing in my game, but you have to take a trait to take it. It's not the default assumption that all weapons are that trick weapon type of thing. I think that's a very I think that worked very well for a computer game where you're a one-man army, and so you need that sort of flexibility in terms of your offensive abilities. I think that worked quite well. Whereas this is an RPG where you've got a team of people, and I kind of want, well, this person's the range person, this person's the utility person, and this person's the frontline fighter. Or maybe, and this fourth person is actually the all-rounder who's actually got a trick weapon that allows them to sort of fill in the gaps and be anywhere. So that's sort of like emphasizing more team gameplay in what I'm doing.
It has been interesting seeing seeing more and more games not only have that assumption of playing in a party, but also building mechanics around the fact that you're not supposed to be necessarily a one-man army.
Hmm.
Uh,
It all comes down to the medium of the game. I think the
Mhm.
stuff that the computer game does well and things that a tabletop RPG does well,
Mhm.
I don't like. This is my personal take. I don't actually like games that try to directly mimic other games from another medium and say, look, you can just do that here. Like, for example, I don't actually like the official Bloodborne RPG, even though it would give a more tight Bloodborne experience in terms of your mimicking. What I'm trying to do is create something that say it's like that. That's the anchor point in terms of how the game feels.
Mhm.
But I'm not trying to mimic that because I think I wanted to make a game that does what an RPG does well. So my game has a
Yeah.
lot more NPCs that you can talk to. It's actually lived in by NPCs. It's meant to be a team game,
Mhm.
you know, a lot more mystery and investigation, not just fighting everything. But I mean, these are the more obvious sort of takes that you can see how it's different. But
Mhm.
obviously the same in terms of gothic and big giant weapons, fighting giant monsters, and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Yeah.
Now, when you say you weren't a fan of the Bloodborne RPG, are you talking about the one that was made by Katakawa that wasn't fully translated?
Oh man, so that's a while ago. You probably caught me in that I haven't done a deep enough dive. I
Because
just remember seeing it in passing, and I think it's probably more the idea of it that I don't like than necessarily gonna pick on a game specifically.
yeah, there
Um,
was
yeah.
an attempt to do Dark Souls in 5e that did not have the best reception for various
Hmm.
reasons. I had criticized it at the time, not just for using 5e's rule set. My attitude was is okay, it's doing that, but let's see, but so are other folks, and I want to see how it's doing it within that sandbox. But my big point of critique at the time was creating problems that didn't exist. The big one was combining what would have been in the game health and stamina
Hmm.
into one resource called position that acted as both. Um,
Hmm.
I felt that would, first off, if you're giving somebody that kind of limited resource, there's a tendency to be conservative with it.
Yeah.
But also, this is there what I didn't quite understand why that was even necessary. Um,
I think it's because people feel if you say that this game is this mimicking this other game, you feel
mhm,
obligated to put the core parts of that other game into it. For example, the FromSoft games have that stamina balancing your offense and your defense um, element, but also FromSoft games, the way you win them is effectively just endurance. If you just keep playing it, you're going to win. Whereas I think porting those over to RPGs is very difficult, And in fact, I don't like doing that sort of stuff. But yeah.
mhm. Uh, but for me, it was just a case of if you just did health and stamina, I don't think anyone would raise a fuss, or
Hmm.
just an AP, just have stamina as an AP system. Uh,
Hmm.
it was the fact that stamina is also HP.
Yeah.
That was the thing that bugged me. But one of the classic things with a lot of Souls likes is having those large encounters that are phase based, where the further it goes on, the more the enemies get changes. I
Yep.
am curious if that's something that you've considered.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, that's in my game.
Hmm.
So the way that I've got it is that when the GMs are making NPCs, and I've got a bunch of pre-made NPCs in my book,
Hmm.
and I'm hoping to do a second book that is filled with pre-made NPCs. I really want to empower GMs. You get a certain amount of sort of traits and variations you attach to them, and some of those variations are phases. Most of them are not. Most of them are just sort of emphasizing, is this a caster opponent or a tanky opponent or like a stealthy opponent? Sort of grabbing their major nature and applying it to them. But there's a couple of those that are, after you've taken a certain amount of damage, select one of these three options. You gain a new weapon or you gain some sort of boost or something like that. I've also got options there if you want to do the weak spot opponent. So all they get the giant armor except for one of their attributes is weak, so you want to aim for that when you're shooting them. Adding that sort of mechanical diversity. I'm not going for every opponent is phase, but if the GMs want to do that, the option's there, and some of the pre-made bad guys will be that. So, for example, I've made it's a draconic fiend, and he's got a phase that after you beat him up, he starts off just using his breath weapon and his fear against you. But after you beat him up, he'll start using his claws. He'll start coming in for some close combat sort of stuff to sort of mix it up. And I think those are fun because it's a little bit different to a computer game where you're trying to memorize your opponent's sort of pattern, and that's how you win. In an RPG, what I'm actually trying to do with phases is not just add sort of mechanical diversity so your opponents feel fresh and an interesting puzzle for players to solve, but also just like to add that element of surprise to a fight. You start your fight, it starts off being a certain way with a certain vibe, and then all of a sudden it shifts. Maybe some extra opponents join the fight midway through, or the opponent gains a new ability, or they change, and then the whole table feels, oh, it's different, and they sort of wake up, and everyone gets a little more engaged because now they thought they'd solved the puzzle, and now there's a new puzzle to solve as a team, and that I like that stuff. Like that's fun gaming. That's the game side of it.
Yeah, it does call back to something that that was in the book by Ralph Koster, A Theory of Fun, which I always recommend that book to people whenever I get a chance. Where he talked about how people derive the fun part in games from coming up with a creative solution to an obstacle and being rewarded in some form for doing that. And sometimes that reward is tangible, and sometimes it's something that's less tangible. But there is some sort of reward for that. And you kind of touch on that with that puzzle-like approach. Plus, there is already precedent for that kind of thing because, well, that's more or less how boss design has worked in every Mega Man game since day one.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Doubly so on the signposting of it in the X games.
Look, I'm a gigantic fan of game designers, no matter what your medium is. Has so much to learn from other mediums. Like I include computer games in that, and same as board games, but I think computer games are probably a big one because they're just really well thought out. A lot of these have a lot to actually offer RPGs. Now, as I've said like a million times, don't try to just replicate it one for one. You're just going to end up sucking. Like, know what your medium does well and triple down on that. But grab these basic lessons that were learned a long time ago. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah, I certainly didn't, and I don't. I'd like to think that with my own project, I wasn't slavish to the source material to a certain extent. But
I'm probably going a little bit hard on that. Don't be overly slavish to the source material because it's primarily a matter of my taste. I will express that. It's a bit like I don't like tomatoes in my food, and so I'm going to get quite adamant about not having that in my food because I don't like it. But if other people do like it, that's cool. But for me and my taste and what I'm aiming for, I like making stuff that's original mechanics, original IPs. You can draw inspiration. That's fine. That's cool. That's good. Yeah, but I like new stuff.
Yeah. I can certainly get that. And it does appear that one thing that I did notice was looking at the different archetypes, which
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's just me, but I think this is the first. I think this is one of the rare times that you've had something like a class or archetype set up. A lot of the previous Frag games are very freeform. You
Well,
have
they're sort of species is what they would be.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So in Fragged Empire, you start off, you select your species, and that has a massive deal about who you are narratively. Gives you sort of unique mechanical variation to you. Like,
Mhm.
no one's going to be tougher than a Legion because Legion just get +1 armor, so they're always going to be the tough one. Whereas in Fragged Aeternum, I'm still following that same mechanical framework,
Mhm.
but I'm using archetypes rather than species. But there's a couple of important things on this is different, is that one, you can actually swap your archetype mid-game.
Mhm.
So during frag games, you level up, you get a thing called retro, which lets you change out your traits and stuff, like if you want to alter your character a little bit. But in this one, you can actually alter your entire archetype. Like I could start off being a heretic archetype, and maybe I have some sort of religious conversion, and then I become a pious character,
Mhm.
like mid-campaign. I actually encourage that. And so, as an example, in my short stories that I like to put in the front of my books, I actually have one of the characters going through sort of that archetypal shift. Um, but the archetypes they give you unique mechanical options and access to unique traits
Mhm.
and things like that. But they're also incredibly broad. So, for example, if you're a ravenous character, like maybe you're a vampire, maybe you're a ghoul, maybe you're just a really fat dude who just really likes to eat, or maybe you feed on people's fear, or maybe it's just something to do with you having a unique hunger for a rare and distinctive food source. But you get to say what that is. Like a pious character could be a holy cleric, or maybe it's just a knight who's really, really, really loyal to the king.
Mhm.
You just need to be in service of a greater power. You can define that. So there's a huge amount of narrative flexibility within each archetype as well. And I think, again, that's just something I think RPGs do well. And so
Yep.
I like to triple down on it.
Mhm. And obviously, going with archetype instead of species is going to make sense here because everybody's. I won't say human. Let's go with human adjacent, much like say the concept of
Yeah.
meta-humanity in Shadowrun, where everybody in that setting is technically speaking human.
Yeah. So there's everyone, the default assumption is you're human, and the game does say, okay, you could be fiendish corrupted. So,
Mhm.
maybe you've got horns or something like that, or you could be like a vampire or a fae, but you being one of those and having a soul is actually makes you stand out amongst your own people.
Mhm.
Um, and so, but it does offer the options to be that. Yeah. You
Yeah.
can't ever be a fiend though. Fiends are always evil in this setting.
Mhm.
None of that rubbish. They're just misunderstood, you know, creatures. I'm like, no, fiends are bad. They're always bad,
Mhm.
and they should always be killed.
Yeah. Uh,
The the,
and when,
the Doom guy and the Freya and the Freerin
mhm.
take on things.
Which it is amusing seeing how people have reacted a bit more to it being a bit more refreshing. And I think it's just that the whole demon is misunderstood concept got significantly overexposed to the point where it became it used to be going against the grain and then it became that. And
Oh
these
yeah,
things
it's like
go in
there's
cycles.
there's a rule. We're gonna break the rule because that makes us edgy, and then you become the new rule, and now you're boring, and now breaking your rule becomes the refreshing thing.
Yeah.
Like it's a total cycle, and I think I was sort of this is another. This is turning the interview about things Wade's passionate about. Another things Wade's passionate about is it's okay to make species that are just bad.
Yeah.
It's okay. you can have orcs being misunderstood in your world if you want, or maybe orcs are just evil creatures made by an evil god, and you just need to fight them.
Hmm.
Okay.
I've taken that approach, as well as the fact that oftentimes there's a phrase I use a lot in my streams called "design by gospel."
Hmm.
This idea of we do things a certain way because we've always done things a certain way, but that can apply
Hmm.
just as much to insisting that one not do a certain way, do things a certain way without a strong enough justification for it. Uh, like when I've heard people say, "Oh, you shouldn't do an evil race. That's bad." I ask, "Okay, why?" And the reason that I'm often given is hyperbolic at best, or involves a bunch of language that's glorified flim-flam, if you're familiar with that
Yeah.
term. And
Well, that's a very ambiguous term, but I think I know what you're aiming for.
yeah, flim-flam is a psychological trick where you're just um presenting so much junk info to somebody that their brain just can't keep up, and then they just nod along. Um,
Yeah,
it is a
yeah.
trick you see a lot with confidence men. Um,
You know what? I think back in the old Warhammer 40k RPG, there was a whole skill about that. It was
which
just
would make sense. I mean,
talking BS.
which would make sense. I mean, are you do you remember the Hand of Dust ability that Nagash has?
Oh, that sounds
Which
familiar, but I don't remember what that one
now
was.
the sane way to do this would be, you flip a coin and call it. If the opponent calls it wrong, one enemy turns to dust.
Yeah.
That's not the approach they did. You have to hide one. You have to take one of your dice in one hand, hide both hands behind your back, and your opponent has to guess which hand has the dice,
Oh.
which is is like that scene with the two cups in Princess Bride and the ridiculous mental gymnastics involved.
Yeah. No, a simpler way. I think, but getting back to that whole like
Mhm.
world creating thing, just
Yep.
to sort of, I'll sort of
Hmm.
lock down my position on this.
Oh yeah.
My position is I'm okay with all types of world creating.
Hmm.
Like I'm okay, like for example, my Fragged Empire games very logic first,
Hmm.
So my Nephilim, which the big bad evil species, actually they want to be good and they're trying to change and they're trying to grow. Some of them are just monsters, but lots of them are trying not to be monsters. And they were
Hmm.
kind of made that way, and it's kind of sad. you know. But then in Fragged Aeternum, I'm like, no, some things are just bad, because that's because the game's trying to tell a different narrative story. And I think I get a bit uppity when people tell people they're not supposed to world build a certain
Yeah.
way because of my weird moral code and my way that I like to use language and stuff like that. Yeah.
And something wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Before we went live, we had talked about about design literacy, and
Mhm.
it kind of touches on that. And it really comes down to there's no a lot of people thinking there's a right way to do things when there really isn't a lot of times. Uh, there's just a way. Uh, but one of the one of the other things that's fairly common within a lot of Souls likes, and Bloodborne is no exception,
Mhm.
is while it's not doing classes, there are certain leanings in terms of how one builds a character.
Mhm.
Uh, and this is where you get like in, say, Dark Souls, the different magic types, and a lot, or the age old meme of the strength build versus dex build approach.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
is something like that something that's been considered, as far as not in terms of not in terms of the specificity of that, but certain traits are the like that lean more into specific styles.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think so. I think that's one of the. I mean, that's a cornerstone of combat-based RPGs, or
Hmm.
even RPGs in general, is how you create your character. You kind of want that balance of options. People like having lots of options,
Hmm.
mostly because that allows them to create lots of styles of character. Like, do I want to be a knight or do I want to be a merchant? But the other part is you kind of want some choices that other people in your party don't have. So like, I'm a mage, I cast spells. You're a knight, you have a great armor. Okay, and
Hmm.
we both feel special because we're doing something that the other person's not able to do, or not able to do as well. And so very much the same, like what attributes you build is going to do. Like, are you more of an accurate character, or are you more of a damage dealing character? Are you a fast character, or you're a healy character, depending on what attribute you take? Your archetype is a really big one on that one. That really, because it's kind of like a super trait that's really distinctive, that will set your character out. So if you're, like, for example, if you're a gadgeteer, you're just going to be a tricky utility character. Like,
Hmm.
that's just going to be what you're going to do. That doesn't mean you can't be a healer or a spellcaster or a damage dealer as well. But whereas if you're like a beast character, which is very much like a Hulk character at some fight, you're
Hmm.
going to decide when do you go Hulk mode, and that's something that no one else can do. And so, yeah, you've got that sort of stuff. Because I think that stuff's fun. Like, that's just fun. It makes people feel special. It's a bit power fantasy. I get to slowly develop my character and build them and turn my narrative concept in my head into stats, and then, yeah, do stuff with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I do
Yeah.
remember us talking about concept first design. Um,
Yeah, that
earlier.
that was an interesting discussion we were having earlier first.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
And so I think, do you want to sum up what you mean by concept design versus mechanic design? Like, which one foot forward?
yeah, well, um, concept first design is the idea of you build a character concept. This doesn't have to be a full character backstory and all that, but sometimes it's just a sentence or a paragraph of the kind of character, the kind of kit you'd want to play. And you go through the character creation steps with that in mind, trying to get as close to that as you can. Sometimes you can get right on the dot. Sometimes it's a little bit trickier. Uh, a mechanic first one is where you end up building, say, the base stats and the like, and then building the character after that. So it's really more of what foot's being put forward.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I would say all frag games are very, because we're a classless rule system, and it's fairly front loaded in terms of you've got lots of options of how to build your character. It's designed to be quite open in that way. Very much, I think, a concept first game. But it's also a game that takes the mechanics quite seriously as well. So, and I think everyone always does a little bit of both. You're trying to unpick the puzzle of the game that you're playing to find out what works and what doesn't work. And it's not like every option that you take is just it is irrelevant. Yeah, mechanically irrelevant. I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's not to say that concept first is diminishing the relevance of mechanics, but it's more about what the assumption is. And I've
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's what foot you're putting forward first.
mhm,
Not that the other foot is not moved forward at some point, but
yeah.
which one's first? It's like that idea of my world building right at the start. Is it logic first or kind of aesthetic first? And
Hmm.
you're always doing both, but which one's first? Which one's stronger? Which one do you lead with?
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah. And I always love it when games are really upfront about what they are.
Hmm.
Um, Not just because it helps to manage people's expectations and so they're not disappointed when you get your game, but also it helps to inform people so they can say, oh yeah, this is the sort of game that I'm looking for. I don't like it when games do. We are a bit of everything to everybody, and we do anything, and it's all wonderful, no matter how you play it. I'm like,
Yeah,
that's just
that's
rubbish.
one of the that's one of the big lies. And that's admittedly that's part of the reason I've picked on some of these super fans of GURPS, because they keep insisting to me, oh, you can run GURPS in anything, which I've said is the equivalent of, say, your kid wants a Disney princess doll for Christmas and you end up getting them a Princess Leia action figure. You're technically correct, but you kind of missed the point.
Yeah. Well, I grew up playing the hero system, which is a points buy system.
Oh
And
yeah.
technically, yeah, you can play any game you want in that. But you know what? It's still best for a certain type of game, and it sucks for lots of other types of games. Yeah.
That and when you're dealing with that kind of universalist game, you're going to have a higher skill floor. There's no getting around that.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
it's look, I if I'm playing Smash Brothers, I'm not going to enjoy getting wombo comboed. If I'm playing Halo 2, I'm not going to enjoy getting BXR'd. But I know it's going to happen, and you just got to, and it's just how these things work. That's just, you can't get rid of the skill. You might be able to mitigate the skill gap or narrow it to a certain extent, but you can never get rid of it. And speaking on that kind of thing, uh, something that I do find amusing when it comes to the shared elements of of just the Fragged universe entirely is it is an incarnation of that 30 seconds of fun thing that a former Bungie developer had talked about years ago. Even though a lot of people misinterpreted what he had said.
You want to flesh that one out?
So, I forget the guy's name, but he was a combat designer for the original Halo trilogy. And during one behind the scenes segment, he had said, if you can make 30 seconds of fun, you can stretch that out into a whole game. Now, he has since expressed frustration with how people, in his mind, misinterpreted what he was trying to say. Because what he found frustrating was a lot of people thought, oh, you just need to make that 30 seconds and the work's done. No, you make that 30
Oh,
seconds and then you keep iterating on it. You keep changing it. It is a
okay.
contextual loop.
Yeah, the gameplay loop. Like,
Mhm,
what is your gameplay loop? I mean, this is fundamental game design. Like,
mhm.
and people might be like, "Ooh, I'm not sure if RPGs have that." They totally have that. You know, what is your gameplay loop in terms of around the table with various people? Like, what is the cycle that it's going to repeat
Yeah,
itself every session in terms of your choices?
yeah,
And you need and at its core is what I call the core resolution mechanic of a game.
hmm
Is why you ask when you're looking at a game, you're like, okay, how do I make a skill roll? Because that is the
hmm
fundamental thing you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of. What is it? Is it fun? What, and it's going to tell you so much about the game. Is that thing? And I would say for an RPG, if you can make that core resolution mechanic fun,
hmm
that's most of your job done. And in fact, everything else should be feeding, not everything, nearly everything should be
yeah.
feeding back into making that fun and keeping it fun.
hmm
Yeah.
I'd say one really strong example of that 30 seconds of fun is, oddly enough, Arkham Asylum. You know,
Mm.
every obstacle that you're dealing with is either the combat obstacle or the predator obstacle,
Hmm.
and all that's being done is just changing the context and how you have to adapt to the situation, but it is still that
Mm.
core.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, whether it be changes in how the environment is laid out, or changes in enemy types and how you overcome them, and how you balance the overcoming of those enemy types.
Yep. And I would say Fragged, I think, goes particularly well on this front because, in one sense, obviously the GM has a big bit to play with that
hmm
sort of keeping that experience there. But because Fragged takes its game mechanics, its game mechanic options quite seriously as well, As you make your own character and you're altering, like, am I more of a rules-light character or a narrative character, or maybe a bit crunchier character that I've made, you can alter that experience yourself. So keep it fresh and keep it fun and keep it sort of a little bit more aligned to your taste as well.
Yeah. And Frag certainly has that with the more with the lines between the loop between the more active and the downtime parts of the loop.
Yep. So in Fragged Aeternum, you basically got your non-combat skill roll section, which may include arcane rolls or suspense rolls. Then you've got your downtime, which is sort of maybe you're making acquisition rolls to sort of study or acquire gear. And then you've got your combat, which is minis on a grid moving around, making attack rolls and stuff like that. Like, that's the three sort of core types of modes that you've got in Aeternum. In my other titles, I've also got ship combat, or maybe you're making your camp, but that stuff's not in Aeternum.
It would be a little bit hard to do ships when you're in a massive city.
Well, so the advantage narratively of having an endless city that goes on forever in every direction. I've got a quote for this that I rather like. See if I can find this. This is a quote I've got in my book. After 10,000 generations of each walked 10 billion years towards the horizon, they shall stand no closer to the city's edge than whence they began. And so an advantage of having an endless city is it allows kind of a lot of things in it. And so I've got Magitech, flying ships and stuff like that are also in this setting. And I did explore, when I was first doing my game design, doing some mechanics for flying ships, or maybe building your home base sanctuary tower and stuff like that. Yeah. I decided to keep some of the sanctuary stuff in, but like really mechanically dialed all the way back down. And I didn't end up putting the ship stuff in. But you never know. Maybe in the future, flying Magitech ships while you're fighting fiends. That sounds fun to me, but maybe not in the core game.
It's not like Aeternum or any of the other games in the Fragged universe is really hard line on one particular genre. A lot of it is genre mixing. I mean, yeah, you have the heavily gothic city, but you also have you also have these bits of technology, and in that regard, it kind of reminds me of Thief.
Oh man, I love Thief. Yeah, it has the occult stuff in it, plus the techno gadget stuff. Yeah, no, I dig that stuff.
Yeah, and it's not a case where one of them is this invading thing. It's a case of this is something that's here, and it's always been here for the longest time. Like the like the whole thing with the Hammerites and the Mechanists and the like.
Yep. And I think that's the reason I do that in my games is because all Frag games are sort of designed for long campaigns. Like, you can play them one shots, and probably Aeternum more than any other title of mine. Well, except for Ragtag, you could do one shotting in. But one of the things that I think makes long campaigns good is that opportunity for the GM, or giving the GM the tools and open, blatant permission to mix it up. To like, okay, you've just had 8 sessions in the slums fighting fiends. Now you've befriended, the Duke, and the Duke's got a flying airship, wants you to go to one of the moons because there's some otherworldly invaders there. And so the next 6 campaign sessions are you flying around on this ship up to the moon and doing other stuff, and you sort of really mix it up. And then maybe the next one's on a train, or the next one's in the undercity, underground with caves, and you kind of want that variety there, just as you can have PCs of a large variety. You want campaigns of a large variety, sessions of a large variety. And that's my taste. I'm okay with other RPGs not doing that totally. Being more focused, more specific. That's cool. but not it's just not quite what I like.
Yeah. I take a very season-based tiers and tentpoles approach of there's stuff that I'll put in any order, but only between these very specific milestones. It is a motif that I blatantly ripped off from Gargoyles. That's where the name for the concept came from.
Oh, really? Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Tiers and tentpoles was meant to be a compromise because at that you're dealing with 90s television that hated serialization. They like to just be able to throw any episode in any time slot they want. And the folks behind Gargoyles wanted a more direct storyline. So the thing was a compromise. Well, here's some episodes you can arrange in any order you like, but only between certain milestone episodes.
Oh, yep.
But with all that said, are you going to be going to backer kit or Kickstarter with Fragged Aeternum 2?
Kickstarter this time around. I did back a kit for Frag Kingdom, but previously I'd pretty much always been Kickstarter. But I think I'm going to go back to Kickstarter. I like it as a platform. Yeah, from a creator perspective, it seems a lot more polished, and I think it gives a better user experience as well. Yeah. Nice. Although Backer Kit has an excellent pledge manager. I really like the Backer Kit pledge manager.
And when are you planning on launching the Kickstarter?
So the hope is mid this year, but there's probably two requirements on that one. One is I'd like to have a certain amount of art done before I launch. Because art is the thing that slows everything down. It just takes time, and I don't want to rush it. So if I can get a certain level of art done, I'll be able to go live, and also a certain number of people signed up to my Kickstarter page, saying, I've got that page up now where people can click there and click notify me when this campaign launches. When I get enough people clicked on that, I'll be able to go live. But I basically gonna try and finish the book before I launch, because I just think that gives a better customer experience. But I also, gotta make sure I launch when I feel like it's ready and it's got enough people expression of interest.
Oh yeah, I can definitely get that, and I will keep an eye out for the Kickstarter proper. And for those of you who are going to be looking at the YouTube version of this, there will be a link to the Kickstarter in the description. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way over to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Thank you so much for having me again. I always appreciate it.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. Thank you for the follow. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.